Next on the news. Bands keep the beat as Italians march the streets, ready to celebrate and also stand by their convictions.
Flags along Fifth Avenue waving for Christopher Columbus. I'm Jessica Easthope with a celebration of Italian heritage that's taking over New York.
Then to the war in Ukraine, the biggest bombardment since the invasion, and Putin says he's not done yet. But many Russians are, and they're not going to fight his war, while the country is experiencing a mass exodus.
It's not something I want to participate in.
New York's housing crisis is worse than ever, but Catholic Charities is sending in the cavalry, the newest affordable housing unveiled. I'm Christine Persichetti. Current News starts right now. Fifth Avenue, the stage, red, white, and green, the banner, Italian pride sailing right on through. According to New York City, October 10th is Italian Heritage Day and Indigenous Peoples Day. But to many of the 1 million spectators lining the avenue, this celebration is and will always be Columbus Day. Current News' Jessica Easthope is there, and she tells us it's here to stay.
Italians from Italy, from right here in New York, and those who want to be Italian are all celebrating today, making sure Christopher Columbus's name lives on even through controversy.
Viva l'Italia! It will always be Columbus Day. I've been here more than 50 years, and I don't know anybody that ever wanted to change it. Colombo, Cristoforo Colombo, not Christopher Columbus.
The day, the name, and the celebration, all part of a tradition Rosa Cerrado won't give up.
People, they want to change it because it doesn't fit their agenda.
Rosa joined the masses Monday who lined the streets in Midtown to watch the 78th annual Columbus Day Parade. More than 35,000 people marched in the parade. Floats with live performers and depictions of the explorer sailed down Fifth Avenue. But front and center, along with the floats, was the ongoing debate surrounding Columbus Day. Angelo Vivolo, president of the Columbus Heritage Coalition, has made his position known. Indigenous peoples should be celebrated, but on a different day.
We think it's a disservice, a disrespect to both communities, both cultures.
New York City's colorful Columbus Day celebration started the way it always does, with Mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral.
On Columbus Day, we celebrate the evangelization of the Americas and the good news of the gospel of Jesus arriving.
In his homily, Bishop Emeritus Nicholas DiMarzio touched on what he says are historical inaccuracies about the explorer and his treatment of Native Americans.
He had a journal, an extensive journal he wrote every day. We could see his character. There's no way we can say he was responsible for any of the ills that seem to be attributed to him.
While many take a strong stance on the issue, others say it can be complicated.
I'm on the fence being Italian, but I do understand the political aspects of it.
The beautiful people. But it's two different things. They should have their day and we should have our day.
Governor Kathy Hochul and Congressman Lee Zeldin have both vowed that should legislation seeking to nullify Christopher Columbus Day come across their desks, it will never pass. In Manhattan, Jessica Easthope, Currents News.
Another person who's celebrating is Andre Dimino, the president of the Italian-American One Voice Coalition. He says today, being both Columbus Day and Indigenous Peoples Day, is not fair to either group.
Columbus Day should remain as a federal holiday, and we've got nothing against Indigenous Peoples Day. In fact, we want to celebrate right along with them. They should have their own day, but it shouldn't infringe upon Columbus Day and pit two groups against each other. What people are saying about Columbus, the atrocities and so forth, are really just not true. Those atrocities have been roundly disputed by verifiable facts and primary sources. Those are things that have been contrived as part of cancel culture.
And Dimino says if you cancel Columbus, you cancel all Italians. Andre goes deeper into the day's importance for Italian Americans in an exclusive editorial for the tablet newspaper, so make sure you pick it up. The celebrations actually date back to the late 1800s when Italian immigrants were experiencing prejudice so severe the White House had to step in. Andre tells us all about it, plus his own experiences in his upfront and personal. Didn't get enough Columbus Day coverage here. There's even even more on the tablet website, including pictures of the Diocese of Brooklyn's float and a full recap of this morning's Mass. You can also watch Bishop Emeritus Nicholas DiMarzio's homily in full there. Just follow online at thetablet.org. In the past couple of years, countless statues of the explorer have been torn down across the country, many asking what could be next on the Columbus chopping block. But the famed statue standing tall in New York City isn't going anywhere. The Columbus Circle Monument is protected under preservation laws on both the state and national levels. Before he resigned, New York's former governor, Andrew Cuomo, insisted the statue stay right where it is in Columbus Circle, pointing to its importance in the Italian-American community after years of discrimination. In fact, Italian-Americans were at the center of the largest single mass lynching in U.S. history. Back in 1891 in New Orleans, a police chief was murdered. Italians thought to be responsible were rounded up by the hundreds, but the ones that went to trial for the crime were acquitted. Still, a large crowd of New Orleans citizens were unhappy with the result. They broke into the prison and murdered the man on trial and those yet to be tried, 11 in all. The police did nothing to stop them. Also tonight, the gloves are off.
We have no doubts that this is a terrorist attack.
Russia unleashing the biggest barrage of bombs since the Ukraine invasion, as the tit-for-tat attacks escalate. Tonight on Currents News, Putin's revenge. He said the coordinated strikes were payback after Ukraine blew up a bridge in Crimea. But according to Ukraine, Russia's attacks were different. They hit 8 cities around the country, targeting civilians and killing several people. The U.S. Embassy has told citizens to get out of the country now. Putin is warning that his fury isn't finished, that his forces will execute even more attacks in the coming days. Experts say his retaliation is meant to terrorize. Ivan Rodriguez has the latest.
Massive explosions rocking power lines in Dnipro, Ukraine, sending debris raining down on top of drivers frozen in their tracks. In Zaporizhia, flames raged from the rubble of an apartment building, reduced to ruins after strikes from Russian rockets. And unsettling images reveal children's playground equipment among smoldering, scorched earth. These are just a few of the lethal attacks unleashed across Ukraine by Russian forces targeting power plants, bridges, and other infrastructure, the heaviest since Russia began its invasion of Ukraine.
They're trying to spread chaos and panic. They want to annihilate our energy supplies. They're hopeless. Their second target is our people. They specifically selected this time in order to hit us the hardest.
Russia says the attacks are in response to the bombing of the Kerch Bridge linking Russia and Crimea on Saturday. Kyiv has not claimed responsibility for that blast.
All assigned targets are hit.
A senior Biden administration official says the White House is closely monitoring the attacks and finds them troubling.
We're in touch almost daily with the Ukrainians, and we're going to continue to provide them security assistance.
I'm Ivan Rodriguez reporting.
Since the invasion began, Putin has issued veiled warnings that he has no problem using nuclear weapons. Pope Francis is now responding to that, saying we need to choose the path of peace and learn from our past, particularly the 1960s.
Non possiamo dimenticare il pericolo di guerra nucleare che proprio allora minacciava il mondo. Perché non imparare dalla storia? Anche in quel momento c'erano conflitti e grandi tensioni, ma si scelse la via pacifica.
That was in October of 1962 during the Cold War, when tensions between the U.S. and Russia soared because of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Meanwhile, migrants may soon be on the move in New York City. A building is in the process of going up on Randall's Island, a humanitarian emergency response and relief center. It'll open soon and house some 500 of the more than 16,000 migrants who have been bused to the Big Apple in the last few months. This location was Plan B for the city after its first location for a tent city, Orchard Beach in the Bronx, was flooded. Speaking of housing, Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens is spearheading city support for seniors with a new state-of-the-art building. The Bishop Rene Valero's senior residence in Astoria is a 6-story building that offers 102 affordable units. But that's not all the building does. It also offers on-site social services and an adult senior center complete with everything from educational forums to fitness classes. Bishop Brennan was at the dedication and praised the work of Catholic Charities, who has been providing affordable housing in this city for the last 47 years.
The Bishop Rene Valero Senior Residence stands as a beautiful home for our aging sisters and brothers, enabling them to build new memories now, to access the services they need to age in place with independence. I thank Catholic Charities Brooklyn and Queens as it continues to build upon its mission of living out the gospel message of care for brothers and sisters and helping to provide more than just apartments, but of providing a home.
Bishop Rene Valero, who the building was named after, was an auxiliary bishop of Brooklyn from 1980 to 2005. He was a fierce advocate for the elderly, working side by side with Catholic Charities for decades. Meanwhile, the Bishop of Brooklyn also praised the work of more than a dozen ethnic ministries at the second Shining Stars Awards dinner over the weekend. The annual event honors individuals in cultural ministries for their service to the church and for preserving their traditions in this big city. Among the countries celebrated Friday evening, Pakistan, the Philippines, and the Dominican Republic. At the end of his speech, Bishop Brennan thanked all of the shining stars of the diocese, past, present, and future. There's a lot more news headed your way. Are you uncomfortable talking about your faith? A new study says a good chunk of Catholics are.
We're talking about the most serious, devout Catholics, like you said.
The results coming up. Plus this. The Catholic Church has 2 new saints. We'll take you to the Vatican for their canonizations. And dodging the draft. Hundreds of thousands in Russia are trying to do just that. It's a groundbreaking study about devout Catholics across the U.S., and some of the results might surprise you. DeSales Media, the parent company of Currents News, joined forces with Vinia Research to look into intentional discipleship. They examined more than 3,000 intentional disciples, basically Catholics who take their faith seriously, to pinpoint their needs. The researchers say some results were expected, but others were surprising. For example, 1 in 5 devout Catholics are not comfortable talking about their faith. And while 76% are interested in developing their evangelization skills, 39% don't know where to start. Joining us now to break down what all of this information means is Dave Plisky, the Director of Product and Innovation for DeSales Media. Hi, Dave. Nice to have you here.
It's great to be here, Christine.
So, Dave, this is perfect timing for this survey with the synod happening. We're trying to listen to the concerns of parishioners. Why is this research needed now?
Well, like you said, the Synod on Synodality is kind of wrapping up its first session. And, in Brooklyn and around the world, we're hearing that, the need is there for lay leadership and for formation, among the lay leadership. And that's exactly the type of things that we're hearing as well from this study, which is so important because whether you work in ministry or you are just a Catholic trying their best to live as a disciple, we need to know what do disciples look like? What are their needs? What are their hopes? And the better we know that, the better we can identify them and hopefully get them what they need to go out on mission and live the Great Commission, right, to make disciples of all nations.
Right. Let's take a look at some of your findings. First, nearly half of those surveyed say they've never received spiritual direction before. Does that surprise you? I mean, we're talking about people who live their faith and take part in parish ministries.
It's true. It partly does and it partly doesn't. Spiritual direction is hard to come by. There's anyone I've talked to said it's difficult for them to find one, either because just like any kind of match, it's hard to find that person for you, but also because there's limited supply. It's only so many people who are actually qualified to be doing this. Priests and monks and sisters, but also some laity do it. So, and I know in my own life it was pretty difficult to find one. At the same time, we're talking about the most serious, devout Catholics, like you said.
Right.
So you would think that these of anyone in our faith would be doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. All right, then there's this one. You found almost all respondents say they use both physical and digital aids in living out their faith. The Bible is the top physical aid at 74%. Podcasts were the top digital aid at 60%. Brooklyn Bishop Robert Brennan has his own podcast. So is this the new way to evangelize, maybe to the younger Catholics?
Absolutely. I mean, we're always on our phones, right? And we're often doing things that allow us to listen to something while we're doing them, whether it's commuting, walking down the street, whatever it is. So yeah, this is one more way to kind of stay connected with your faith, even when you're on the go.
That's great. So how can the Diocese of Brooklyn use this information?
So we're already working very closely with the Secretariat for Evangelization and Catechesis on how we can make sure to kind of use this information that we're finding to implement it. What we do with formation, specifically around the laity and those who lead in the church, we want to make sure that they are supplied with the materials, the resources they need, and also the accompaniment they need so that they feel comfortable to go out and have those important conversations with others and do the deep listening that is such a huge part of getting to know someone and living your faith.
All right, it'll be interesting to see how it all works out after we have the results of the study. Dave Pliskey, Director of Product and Innovation for DeSales Media, thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, Christine.
If you'd like to learn more about the study and its findings, just go to desalesmedia.org/discipleship. Turning now to news at the Vatican, the Catholic world officially has 2 new saints. The newest to join the ranks are Timide Zatti and Giovanni Battista Scalabrini. They were both born in Italy in the 19th century. Zatti was an immigrant nurse who cared for the sick, and Scalabrini founded a congregation for the care of immigrants. During his homily, the Pope criticized the treatment of many migrants arriving on our doorsteps today.
È scandalosa l'esclusione dei migranti. Anzi, l'esclusione dei migranti è criminale. Li fa morire davanti a noi. L'esclusione dei migranti è schifosa, è peccaminosa, è criminale.
The Holy Father went on to say that the Church's newest saints fought against exclusion. Instead, they dedicated their lives to the service of the poor, migrants, and the sick. Now to a mass exodus out of Russia, one that's growing larger by the day.
We don't want this war.
There are hundreds of thousands of Russian men lining up to leave their homeland. They're draft dodgers, refusing to take part in a war they don't want. Many of them are escaping to Kazakhstan, fleeing a conflict they are being forced to fight since Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a draft for at least 300,000 men. As Currents News' Andy Madison reports, some are afraid to even show their face.
Russians abandoning their homeland. Russian President Vladimir Putin's order to conscript men to fight in his war in Ukraine has created an exodus of Russian draft dodgers. They line up daily here in neighboring Kazakhstan to register with the local authorities. The Kazakh government says more than 200,000 Russians fled to this country in less than 2 weeks.
We don't want this war.
Many of Russia's land borders choked for weeks with long lines as citizens run for the exits. Draft dodgers traveling by land wait days in line or pay big money for scarce plane tickets to escape. This married couple left together.
It was a final kick to start our journey, I guess. Yeah.
The flood of new arrivals surprising local business owners, like an owner of a co-working space in the center of Almaty.
Every day is like this. They're coming with huge suitcases because they couldn't find a place for living, and they're coming here for working and sitting and looking for some accommodation.
In Almaty, a city hundreds of miles from the Russian border, there are dozens of newly arrived Russians, ranging from doctors.
If we refuse to go to this war, we should go to the jail.
To engineers, IT specialists, and university students. Most don't want to be identified to protect loved ones still in Russia.
How can I take part in the war without a wish to win this war?
This man says Putin's draft left him no other choice but to flee the country, leaving his wife and child behind.
We do not trust our government. We do not believe in what they say.
He says a Russian government crackdown on dissent has made protesting futile, leaving hundreds of thousands of men now suddenly adrift, trying to find work and accommodations in foreign countries.
I am the citizen of the country that started that war. I do not support this war, never did. But somehow I'm still connected with the state because of my passport. And I am at the same time a refugee and the aggressor.
Russians on the run, sharing a collective sense of hopelessness and guilt over the destruction caused by their government. Andy Madison, Currents News.
Still to come on Currents News, it would have cost $30,000, but it's on the house for this World War II vet.
Very thankful. Not very often you get something for nothing.
And it's a girls' camp meant to spark a passion for firefighting. We'll show you when we come back. Sacramento City Fire Department has been working overtime to inspire the next generation of firefighters. And these teenage girls could be the future of the force. The city started a training program called the Girls Fire Camp, and it's designed to inspire more women to consider careers in emergency services. It's led by local firefighters with years of experience, and they teach real-life skills like search and rescue, first aid, and CPR.
Empowerment is the core of what we do and the mission that we're trying to carry out here.
We're using saws, we're doing hoses, we're raising ladders, we're climbing up these massive buildings. I've only seen this stuff in like TVs and movies, and I thought it was so cool. I get to come here and see the stuff in real life.
According to the National Fire Protection Association, in recent years, there's been an increase of women joining the force, but they still only make up 10% of U.S. fire departments. More than 70 million people fought in World War II, and in the United States, there's just a small fraction of them still alive. The Massachusetts man you are about to meet fought in one of the war's bloodiest face-offs, the Battle of the Rhineland. But all these years later, he didn't even have a proper roof over his head until someone decided to give back free of charge.
We were quite a crowd here. We had a good life here. My wife and I enjoyed it.
97-year-old John Burke says he bought this house in Worcester, Massachusetts in 1970 at a price of $15,000. He and his late wife Claire lived here with their 8 children. He says the house was always very lively, to say the least. But these days, it's much quieter. The World War II veteran and retired teacher lives here alone. And when his roof started leaking, the Owens Corning Roof Deployment Project, which installs new roofs for military families for free, stepped in.
Qualified for this home improvement project, and they're gracious enough to supply all this free of charge.
We partner with Owens Corning and the Habitat for Humanity, and we are redoing his roof for him, giving him a brand new roof. It's a great thing to give back to another generation, another family.
When I told him what was happening, it actually brought him to tears. At least this will be peace of mind for the family that the roof over his head is safe.
Very thankful, yeah. I mean, it's not very often you get something for nothing. But I mean, I appreciate it.
And we thank you, John Burke, for your service. That is Currents News. I'm Christine Persichetti. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.